Thank you for tuning in to the Three Circles Living podcast, where you can learn how to improve your life. And it doesn't matter if you want to accelerate your career, you want to have better relationships personally or professionally, be healthier, find fulfillment and your purpose in life. This is a podcast for you. And make sure to share it and leave us a comment with what you found most valuable, because it definitely helps us to provide even more value to you. Today, we're going to talk more about the side hustle and the side hustle shift. And I don't know about you, but there's definitely this movement from wanting to not live paycheck to paycheck, right? And building that financial security and having multiple streams of income. And we want to talk about that more, what that means, what that could mean for you, what there is, right? Everything about side hustle, but also how it improves your life on many different levels that you might not think about just because you're going for that end goal, but there's more to it. And I think it could be, I want to say, I'm going to throw that out there. Everybody should have one because it adds to your life in many different ways. But we're going to jump right in, and there will be probably multiple episodes on this because there are different ways of looking at that, and we want you to really understand what there is.
That's because, Chris had mapped this episode out and I just blew up her map. I just destroyed her map. So you can blame me. I will be happy to take responsibility.
You can do that anytime from me, please.
Oh, I did, right? I did. So, I'd rather ask for forgiveness than permission.
Yes.
You tend to get in better places in life. But Chris, I want to open this by asking you a question for the
Okay.
audience. Why did you start your first side hustle?
That is a good question. I think for me, it was always about wanting more money, to be honest with you. I wanted to make more money because I knew that I was going to be limited in my job, and I never thought that I would actually move up the career ladder and be in a management on or any leadership position to actually have a good income. But then the second part was definitely I wanted more freedom, especially when I had my first kid. I was like, let's just say there are not a lot of good benefits here in the US, and I was very spoiled coming from Germany, and I was like, I don't want that. I don't want to have to give up my kid and put her in daycare all day and then come home and then barely see her for an hour and then, do it all over again. So those were the two biggest parts. But the first part was really like having that additional money.
And I've not done any research on this particular question, although it would probably take 30 seconds in AI
Mhm.
to get an answer to this. But I would venture to say the majority of people that do a side hustle, it's for money. That's what brings them to it.
Yeah.
The ironic thing about it is that's not even remotely the biggest win, right? So in other words, yeah, you make more money, depending on what you're doing, right? There's some side hustles that you are just a job, right? It's just a second
Mhm.
job, which was my side hustles as a younger person. But then there are ways to build a life from your side hustle, right? To create all kinds of options. But even then, there's so much more. And I think just like mindset is crucial to anything that you do, right? Anything of value you do, you have to deal with your mindset first. What money is not a terrific reason to do something, because it's a very surface goal. It's just a surface goal, right? It's not really money, right? It's what money represents, right? That's the reality. It's what money represents for the majority of people. For some people, it's purely money, but that's a small percentage of the population. Or it starts as purely money and changes. And that's not even just side hustle. That's life in general. So here's my next question for you. Setting aside any financial impact, what did your side hustle really do for you?
Oh my gosh. I'm gonna be it's gonna sound very stereotype and very dramatic, but it changed my life. Like,
That's not stereotype, by the way.
well, I don't know, but like when I started, again, I started this conversation with I never thought that I would be in a leadership position, right? I never thought I would be good at speaking in front of people or like be able to do that without completely losing it and just turning red all the time and and stuttering. And yet here I am, like that has changed. I am a people person. I did a lot of personality tests and I always was introverted. Now I'm extroverted. I'm more extroverted than introverted, which is crazy to me. I'm like, but I love that. That's where my energy comes from. Um, I think about life differently. Like I have a different peace. I have peace of mind, but not just because I'm financially stable, but I just have peace of mind because I look at life differently and I live in the moment. I could never do that before. I have better relationships. I understand how to set boundaries. I've learned all of that through a side hustle. Like I didn't know that before. I didn't know that no was a complete sentence and I could do that. But because, I understand how to prioritize, how to have time priorities, what's important to me. I mean, all of that, high level.
So that's not what someone would think about when they're
No.
like, I need to do something in addition. Right? I mean, there are people now, right, who live only from, side hustle, side gig. You can use whatever language floats your
Mhm.
boat. That's all they do, right? They participate fully in the gig economy, right? They just do a variety of things, some that are oriented purely towards cash and others that are completely about what drives them, what fills their bucket, what fulfills them, what touches their interest points, and they find ways to create income. So there's a whole there's a whole basket of opportunity relative to those things. But the real power to this, and which goes all the way back to something you said, you used a terrible word, the word should. But in this case, that word is pretty appropriate for the majority of people. And the majority of people should have a side gig or a side hustle, but not necessarily for the money. The money matters, right? But it's for all the other things. And so that's really what this episode we need to touch a little bit to give some perspective, because if you don't understand this, if you don't know this, you might be in a situation where you're like, well, I make enough money, but there's so much more. And even what you're doing to make money could be significantly better
Mhm.
because of a side hustle or side gig. So the personal professional development piece, which you alluded to, is massive. So it goes back to, and I don't know if I've ever talked about this in one of our episodes. I may have, because it's part of platform teaching for me. Is anything you're trying to do, right? Anything you're trying to do to achieve. Naturally, that's going to be your focus point. That's the thing you're working
Mhm.
towards, right? That goal or whatever that is. And it's wonderful, the path to do that. Well, I mean, the path is not always wonderful, right? As a matter of fact, by definition, a lot of the path is not, right? So a happy
Yeah.
life doesn't mean you're happy all the time. And a successful business doesn't mean you love everything that's happening all the time, nor is it a straight up growth curve. But there's a second curve behind that curve, which is the development curve, the becoming curve, who you're becoming in this journey. And I think we touched on it in personal development because it's the most important curve. Because when you accomplish something, that's done. You've done it. It's accomplished. It's over. And it's temporary. But the becoming process is a permanent improvement of yourself, which opens up new doors and new levels of opportunity in life. And the beautiful thing about a side hustle is that's what this does for you. And especially depending on what it is. So if you're doing a side hustle in isolation, that is your own thing, right? You like to craft, so you're going to start a crafting thing, or maybe you put them on eBay, or maybe you do craft shows or whatever. And I'm not a crafter, so I don't know all the ins and outs of crafting. But what I do know is if you go down that road, the first thing you're going to accomplish from that you don't currently have in your job, is you going to develop a true sense of ownership in something where you totally own the responsibility of its happening from a work perspective. That alone will serve you in your life and your career massively, because most people that go to a job do not take ownership in that job. They don't think ownership way. They don't think about all that's going on. They think about this job they're doing. They don't think about how it's connected to everything. They don't think about what role it plays. They don't think about how actually important that job is, because by definition, no job is unimportant. That's why it exists. I mean, it's just the reality of it. And so the building of ownership and the responsibility of that is it's a substantial character developer, and it sprinkles into everywhere else. It's also proactive. You see a side gig, especially something you do for your own. Again, if you're doing it in isolation, like a crafting business, I don't know why I thought of that one, but there it is. Then you have to proactively do it. You have to create the crafts, you have to market the crafts, you have to learn all the other little things that you didn't necessarily recognize, the bookkeeping, the taxes, all this stuff that you got to learn that expands your understanding of life. And I tell you, suddenly you have a whole different view on someone who runs a company. You don't think, oh, that person's lucky. You're like, holy cow, that person busted their ass in so many different ways and had to do so many things. I mean, I'm just doing a little crafting business, and this person's running a $10 million company, which is a tiny company, but not compared to a craft business, right? It's a massive company. And so you have to learn that you have to be completely proactive. You can't do a side thing in reaction, because otherwise you'll never do it. You have to proactively do it every day. You have to proactively do all the things that are involved in it. So naturally, you're going to build these skills that are related to running, even though it's a little business, a business, which will transfer, by the way, into how you run your household. It'll transfer into all these other areas where you become more efficient, because you'll have to. You'll learn about efficiency, right? It's a natural thing. You become more in that aspect of your life. And for some, it's harder than others, depending on what your inclinations are. But the skills piece, that's the beauty. That's the monster, right? The skills piece is the monster, because what you spoke of, right? You now are in a strong leadership position, which maybe I'm wrong, but I think 5 years ago you wouldn't have seen that for yourself. And now not only do you see it that way, you're flourishing in the role because of all these competencies you've cultivated and developed. I would push back that you're extroverted. You're still an introvert. You just have skills now. And so because you have skills, it allows you to confidently navigate extroverted scenarios, whereas before you would have been like, how fast can I get out of here? Right? How quickly can I can I be invisible? Is it possible for me to be invisible while I'm here? Right. But once you get the skills, right? I'm a deep introvert. I mean, deep, but you would never know it. If you met me out, if you saw me in front of a group, if you see me in my work, you would think, that guy's really outgoing. But I'm not. I'm not outgoing, but I'm skilled and I'm confident because I've worked on it in the processes. And so any side gig will force you to work on skills, because you have to talk to people, you have to create connections, you have to build relationships, you have to become very good in how you use your time. Now, if you're purposeful in that, right, and recognizing that, okay, I have to improve my people skills, so that means I am going to have to engage people, but I also need to be reading and learning and studying how to do that best so that I know what to apply, because doing it without studying while you're doing it means you're going to make the same mistakes over and over until something clicks. And just studying about it and not doing it, well, that never works in anything. That's not a thing in the real world. And so the first thing it really does for you is it dramatically improves your core competencies. Now, if you are in a team environment, so it's not you didn't create the side gig, you participated with something as a part of a team, like a home business of some sort that's connected to other people, a direct sales situation or a network situation. You get exposed to this immediately, right? Immediately to the fact that, hey, there's a lot of stuff you didn't learn in school and from your family and from your friends in the community and from the way your local region functions that are like really helpful for creating a good life. You didn't learn any of that. You didn't learn how to plan. You didn't learn how to effectively prioritize. You didn't learn how to utilize your time in the highest way fashion. You didn't learn what your strengths are. You didn't learn how to listen properly. You didn't learn how to ask questions in the right way. You didn't learn any of these things through anything formal. And so you're right now in your career functioning at half-mast at best because you don't know how to do any of this stuff except what you're forced to in your career. That's it, which is why, most people come to a job and they're like freakishly uncomfortable for a long time. Why? Because they going to school to learn how to do a certain thing has nothing to do with actually doing it in the midst of a life and having to communicate and having to be efficient. Those things aren't taught. And so you get that right away, which immediately has a career impact. Like if I have a choice of hiring someone who, one, is only doing the work that they're doing, or two, is doing the work they're doing and has a side gig, I'm hiring the side gig person 10 out of 10 times because I already know they've got a sense of ownership. They've got a higher level of skills. They're proactive. They'll be more efficient. They'll show up with a better attitude. That's this part of the spillover because you are naturally going to be limited when you are in a career working for someone else. If you're not working for someone else, you're not limited. But if you are just by definition. It's the nature of the structure of a company. That's not good nor bad. It's just it's just the way it is, right? So, but that shouldn't be a bad thing. It's only a bad thing if you're expecting something that's not possible, right? If you're expecting to be promoted to the CEO and work your way up to the CEO in your company, you're probably going to be pretty darn disappointed because there's only one of them. And usually they got to mess up real bad or die or retire before there's the next one. That's pretty much how it works, right? And so there's only so many positions to rise. And so if you've got something that's your own, that is filling that extra financial bucket, that's giving you that sense of accomplishment, that's creating that sense of fulfillment, then your work is a really good place. It doesn't feel like a limiting place. It feels like something that's providing a certain portion of what's important for your life, while you then have this other thing that's doing everything else that you want it to do. And you show up in an incredibly different way. Now you got to be taking care of your health. That's a whole sidebar, but you're showing up in the workplace with this bounce in your step, with this energy. And then in general, you're going to be way more effective in the workplace because your people skills are going to be accelerating beyond those around you. And which effectively is spilling back into your emotional intelligence, right? Your emotional intelligence is naturally progressing from the side business. It's not naturally progressing in a career. It's just not naturally progressing. It's going to happen in a side business when you're encountering all these different situations that you have to proactively lean into, right? Your emotional intelligence and your comfort zone, those two things, they kind of grow up at the same time a little bit, because if you look at the emotional intelligence pathway, it starts with self-awareness. That's the very first place it starts. And then it becomes self-management, and then it's social awareness, and then it's relationship management. And you learning all the skills of that But you will never do that unless you get out of your comfort zone. Otherwise, you're only going to engage where you're comfortable engaging, which is going to be based on your skill set, right? Which is complicated by your personality preference, being an introvert, for example, right?
Yeah.
So that comfort zone gets blown up and you're constantly blowing up, which, by the way, people should be constantly blowing it up. If you're not uncomfortable multiple times a week in a significant way, you're not growing in life. But you have to be uncomfortable a lot because that defines you pushing against your own barriers. It means you're trying to become a better version of yourself. And so this whole process of the side piece makes you substantially better and more promotable and opens more opportunity doors in your career as it exists now, and puts you in a place of confidence where you feel like you can tackle that next thing that you thought was so far out of your reach. I mean, all you have to do to get what I'm talking about is think of yourself right now and look back at 10 years ago, what you were afraid of 10 years ago. And look back at the things you didn't do because you were afraid. When you look back now, especially if you're in your 40s or 50s, getting into the higher level of years, you look back and go, I cannot believe I was afraid to do that. I can't believe it. Now, the natural progression of having something on your own and breaking these barriers will reduce that from ever even happening. But if you don't have these things and you're stuck in this one lane doing this one thing that's not forcing you to grow, all those things will continue to compound in your life, right? It will literally continue to create this heap of regrets as you go forward. And this having a side hustle that forces you to grow and develop, it just wipes out the heap. You don't get new heaps. You don't add to that pile. So, not to mention the network and the relationship connections that you make that then serve you in so many ways because you're serving them as you go forward. So that's not everything, but that's like a nice little summary of what it actually, that's the value of doing it. Yeah, the money part is great. The money part is great, especially if you do something and really succeed at it, which is only a function of following a process and not quitting and continuing whatever it is, right? That's why you're where you are now, Chris. That's those two things are married, right? Your career success is married to that.
It is. And you said so many interesting points that I realized as you were talking. I'm like, yeah, I can check that off. Like, two things that I want to highlight for people to really understand, because I think it's misunderstood a lot of times, but it's invaluable, the people that you get to meet. And I can tell you from my perspective, we moved around. My husband was military. It's hard to make friendships, and then the friendships that you make in the military, they move around and then they're gone, and then you're still in the same place and you have to rebuild constantly. But with the side hustle that I'm doing, I have built friendships with all kinds of people from all over the world. And the minute I talk to them, I feel connected and I feel safe, and I can talk to them about things that I haven't talked to anybody else about, which is really interesting, right? So you have that connection, and I feel like we all need that community and we all need that place where we feel like we really belong. And this could give you that, provide that additional value to your life. And you never know who you get to connected to just by doing this. You
Yeah.
never know the people you meet and what role they play in your life or what role you can play in their life. It's amazing. And then the other part is a lot of people think, oh, a side hustle, I'm gonna have so much more stress. It's gonna take so much more time. And how do I do that? How can I do that? How do you do that? And it's like, no, actually, because of the side hustle, my stress is less because I'm also, like you said, all the different points. I'm more efficient. I have I have more skills that I now can have better relationships at home, so I'm not as stressed at home. I have a different view and perspective at work. I can bring myself in differently. I can help people to understand their role and understand my role, that I actually do have value and I'm not just a worker bee and, plug in, plug out, and that's it. Um, so I'm more relaxed and have less stress with a side hustle than without it. And that's not even talking about the additional financial value that it might provide and relieve stress in that way too. So there are different layers to that that it's really worth considering. And it doesn't matter how much time you have now or you can put into a side hustle. It's gonna be worth it in the end because it's gonna save you time.
Well, and I think time is probably where we should go in the next episode. Because what would keep someone from doing something, probably first of all, is they don't think they have enough time, right?
Yes.
That's their time is there's just no time, which I'm going to say is fiction. But we'll talk about it so you can get a perspective on it. And that way, if that is an issue, we can help you blow it up. We can help you. We can't remove your obstacles, but we can show you how to work around them. And I think takeaway wise, ask yourself, do you need to make more money? First of all, ask that question, because that's a viable reason, and a side hustle or side gig is an immediate way you can give yourself a raise, right? And again, depending on what you're doing, you can give yourself somewhat of an immediate raise, but a substantial long-term raise. Or you could just give yourself an immediate raise that doesn't have a long-term raise to it, unless you just continue to compound that. But we can talk a little bit about that too. We'll talk about a lot of different things around this because it's such an incredibly important topic to live a proactive life. But
Yes.
I think that's all for today, don't you?
It is. Just think about it. Maybe let's start there for a little in the comment section. Let's hear from you. Have you ever done a side hustle? If yes, what? Or have you ever thought about it? Let us know.
Good, good.
And with that,
Yeah.
yes, thank you so much. Thank you everyone for listening, and we're looking forward to seeing you next week.
See you next time.
Bye.